everybody. Percy Shelley was born in 1792 and he died in 1822. 29 short years, and what an impact he made. And it's hard to believe, but he was a contemporary of John Keats and Lord Byron. And they all only lived into their 20s and early 30s, maybe with Lord Byron, mid 30s. But in such a short time, they made such an impact. In terms of Percy Shelley's personal life, there are some people who despised him, even members of his own family. And it's hard to really make heads or tails of the truth or what's a lie. But he had some problems with family and friends. Politically, some people didn't like him. He was very radical. I mean, imagine that in the time he lived in. I mean, pretty amazing. But at the same time, nobody can doubt the power of his poetry. Not even his enemies question that. So these people came out of the Romantic poem traditions, the Romantics. Jacob, are you familiar, or have you dealt much with that school of poetry?
Not the poet so much, but a little bit of the art and maybe some of the literature, but not so much the poems. But I'm familiar with Shelley, but I'm not as familiar as you are, of course, because you teach it. But I don't actually teach him.
If you could bring up the poem I sent you.
Sure.
This is a poem that he wrote during his time in Italy, stanzas written in dejection. And we won't read the whole thing, but I want to point out the very first line and then the few lines after that. The sun is warm, the sky is clear. It's almost like a child is writing that first line because it's so plain and it's just so innocent. But I think that was by design, because right after that, he's off to the races. He says, the waves are dancing fast and bright, blue isles and snowy mountains where the purple noon's transparent might, the breath of the moist earth is light. So this is about the power of personification. And personification, as you teach students in an English class, it means to give human qualities to things. The waves aren't crashing, they're dancing. The blue isles and the mountains are wearing the noon's might. I mean, it's a real powerful image. And the breath of earth, of all things, is light. I mean, this is where students can look, and you will give them an assignment perhaps to write their own personifications. And if they ask the question, well, how do you do that? Well, look at Percy Shelley's example here. And then maybe they can start writing about the grass is, I don't know, singing. The forests are crying. And you could just sort of help them create whatever personification they can do as they build a poem of their own. But maybe the rule is, give us 4 lines of this type of symbolism, of personification, the way Percy Shelley does here. Now, that's one thing. The other thing is, it is very ironic. Now, the thing about irony is that it's very hard to teach if you just look at the definition of irony. People have just sort of pulled their hair out and thinking, I still don't get it. The best way to teach irony isn't to look at the definition of it, but to look at examples of it. So the title is quite ironic if you look at the first 2 stanzas. Stanzas written in dejection. He's supposedly in depression, very low spirits, but you can't really see it in that first stanza. Look at the word choices. Dancing, fast, and bright. The breath of the moist earth, light. Look at that line towards the bottom. The light, the winds, the birds. The word choices do not reflect the title at all. Even the second stanza, you see a lot of colors, green and purple, waves upon the shore, stars showers thrown. This is really a hallmark of the Romantics, is that even when they're depressed, they can't help but celebrate nature. They're going to spend 2 stanzas. Percy Shelley's going to spend 2 stanzas just talking about how beautiful everything is. It isn't until the 3rd stanza that everything is lost. And you could kind of, if you could scroll up a little bit, you could sort of see it. I mean, with the first 2 lines, I have no hope, nor health, nor peace within, nor calm around, nor that content surpassing wealth the sage in meditation found, and walked with inward glory crowned. He's basically saying, I'm not like the Christians who walk with peace. At least in his idea of what he read, I'm not like that guy who walked with inward glory crowned. He was an atheist, but he's saying, I'm just in this state right now. And he, it's such an interesting contrast, but he doesn't get there, like I say, to the 3rd stanza. So I think if you can see some of his word choices in the first 2 stanzas, you can start to see the irony of the title. And so perhaps if I'm giving this lesson, I would spend time with personification, but maybe for a student who's in 11th or 12th grade who wants to see what irony is, I would look at this poem because it's pretty sophisticated if you think about it. I might have them give a poem and flip it, a poem assignment where I flip it, where I say, give us a title that kind of shows joy, demonstrates joy in the title, but then in the stanzas, you give us the opposite. And then once you do that, you have created your own irony. So that's the best way they can learn literary devices like these, is that they do it themselves. And then I could point out, hey, what do you mean you don't know irony? You just wrote it. So that's Percy Shelley. That's one of many great poems.
Can I ask you though, Ruben? I mean, besides Shelley, I mean, is there any other poets? You mentioned some before, but any actual poems you would recommend to the audience from the Romantics? There's a lot of
Time fails me. There's so many. We're not going to stop right here with Shelley. And I know this week we discussed Langston Hughes, but there's so many just with the Romantics. And in fact, as much as I like the Romantics, I think I even like the next group a little bit better, which were the Victorians. But they were both, they both kind of knew each other at the same time. They weren't so far apart. But John Keats wrote what many people consider some of the best poems ever. Ode to Autumn, all the odes. I was going to talk about La Belle Dame Sans Merci, which is another great one. And I do want to say, considering Lord Byron, and they were friends, Byron and Percy Shelley, part of teaching poetry or any writer, part of, I think, the effectiveness of doing so is by talking biography. And when you give a little biography of the writer, for some reason, students tend to buy into the work a little bit better. I've noticed that. Yeah. And so one of the things I like to talk about when bringing up Shelley is that one day Percy Shelley and his buddy Lord Byron, who also wrote incredible poems. It's funny with Lord Byron, when a poem of his would come out, it would be the equivalent of a new movie by I don't know, the Coens, or that's what was big. It's like, I can't believe Byron's coming out with his next one, and people would be waiting, and they would be writing to the editors, and when is this happening? But Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, decided one day to write a scary story, because that had been growing. That was pretty big back then. Write a haunted story, and they all tried it. Even Percy Shelley's wife, they asked her to join them as they were in a cottage somewhere in Italy, and they were trying to write the perfect scary story. And who would have thought that Lord Byron, then either Lord Byron nor Percy Shelley would have written the famous one. Instead, it was his unknown wife, Percy Shelley's wife, Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. Yeah. Anyway.
Cool story.
And that's another Frankenstein is definitely a cool story to look at.
Mhm.
Anyway, thank you, everybody. The great poets, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.